I just remember right here.
64.
Yeah?
And where you at? Where you from? What?
There is a child walking this earth right now who carries King Von's blood, and almost nobody in hip-hop has said his name out loud. Not Lil Durk. Not OTF. Not a single person from Oblock who claims to ride for Von every single day has acknowledged this child publicly, and according to sources close to the situation, that silence is not accidental. That silence is allegedly coordinated. Think about that for a second. The man whose storytelling changed Chicago rap forever, the man whose face is tattooed on thousands of people who never even met him, allegedly left behind a son that the people closest to him have been working overtime to keep out of the spotlight. And the question that nobody in hip-hop is brave enough to ask out loud is this: why? Why would the people who profit from Von's name and legacy every single day go this quiet about a child who deserves to be known? What exactly are they protecting? And more importantly, who are they protecting it from? Here is what you need to understand before you even think about clicking away. Von's mother, Tesa, has allegedly been sitting on information about this child for years, watching from a distance as people built careers and collected checks off her son's name while this boy grew up in the shadows. And according to insiders who spoke to sources familiar with the situation, something happened in the last few weeks that pushed her past her breaking point. Something that made her decide that the silence was no longer something she was willing to keep. Whatever she is about to say is going to change the way you see everything you thought you knew about King Von's legacy. Stay right here, because this is the story they did not want told. Davon Daquan Bennett was born on August 9, 1994, in the Parkway Gardens housing project on the south side of Chicago, a place so dangerous it earned the name Oblock in memory of a young man named Orlando who was killed on those very streets. Von grew up surrounded by violence, poverty, and loyalty, a combination that would eventually define every bar he ever recorded and every story he ever told on a microphone. By the time he signed to only the Family and Empire distribution in 2018, the world was beginning to understand that this was not just another Chicago rapper. This was a generational storyteller who could make you feel the weight of a street corner at 2 in the morning in a way that no ghostwriter could ever replicate. What the world also knows is that Von was a father. He spoke about his children in interviews, referenced them in his music, and according to people who knew him personally, he took that responsibility seriously in the way that men from his background often do, quietly, privately, and with a fierce protectiveness that rarely made it into public conversation. He had children whose mothers were known to his circle. He had relationships that fans followed on social media. But according to sources close to the situation, there was one child, one specific child, whose existence was kept in a completely different category from everything else in Von's life. And this is the part that nobody is talking about. According to insiders familiar with the inner workings of Von's personal life during 2018 and 2019, there was a woman who Von had been seeing during the early rise of his career, a period when he was recording what would become some of his most celebrated projects, when the money was just starting to come in and the streets of Chicago were watching him ascend in real time. Sources claim this woman was not part of the social media world that surrounded Von's more public relationships. She was allegedly kept separate, intentionally, because Von reportedly told associates that he wanted to protect her from the attention and danger that came with his name. According to one source who spoke on condition of anonymity, Von allegedly said to a close friend, and these are not confirmed words but words that have reportedly been shared within certain circles, that he had something real with this woman and he was not going to let the streets touch it. But here is where it gets interesting. Sources close to the situation allege that sometime in late 2019, this woman gave birth to a boy, a son. And according to these same sources, Von knew about the pregnancy, was allegedly present for conversations about it, and had reportedly begun making arrangements to be involved in the child's life in the months before everything changed. The child would have been barely a year old when Von was shot and killed outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia on November 6, 2020. He was 26 years old. And when the world stopped to mourn him, when Lil Durk posted that devastating tribute, when Chicago held its breath and hip-hop went silent for a moment, this child, according to sources, was somewhere in the city, too young to understand what had just happened, being raised by a mother who had allegedly been told, in no uncertain terms, to stay quiet. Now here is the twist. The instructions to stay quiet allegedly did not come from Von himself. According to sources familiar with the situation, Vaughn had never told this woman to hide the child or deny his existence. The pressure to remain silent allegedly came from a different direction entirely, from people within Vaughn's circle who had very specific reasons for wanting the number of Vaughn's known children and heirs to remain exactly where it was. When you start thinking about what Vaughn's name is worth today, when you look at the streaming numbers that continue to climb years after his death, when you consider the ongoing conversations about his estate and the financial interests attached to his legacy, the motivation for keeping an additional heir out of the picture becomes something that sources describe as not just personal but allegedly financial in nature. Stay right here because it gets worse. According to insiders who claim to have knowledge of the situation, the mother of this child allegedly attempted to make contact with Vaughn's family in the months following his death. Not publicly, not through social media, privately, through channels that people in their world use when they want to handle something with discretion. And according to these sources, those attempts were not met with open arms. They were allegedly met with silence, then with what sources describe as indirect pressure, a communication style that people from certain environments understand immediately even when no explicit threat is ever spoken. The message, according to sources close to the mother, was allegedly clear. Stay out of the way. Do not surface. Do not complicate what is already complicated. And for years, reportedly, she did exactly that. She raised her son in a quiet part of the city, working, staying off social media, keeping the boy's connection to Vaughn's name in a place where only people who needed to know actually knew. According to sources, the child is now approximately 5 or 6 years old enough to ask questions, old enough to notice things, old enough that the silence his mother has been keeping is starting to require active maintenance rather than just passive privacy. And it is allegedly that pressure, the pressure of a growing child who is beginning to understand the world around him, that sources claim has been pushing this mother toward a breaking point that has been building for months. But what finally pushed Vaughn's own mother, Tesa, into allegedly deciding to speak is something else entirely. And that is where this story shifts from private family drama into something that sources describe as a reckoning that the people around Vaughn's legacy were not prepared for. What sources allege happened in the weeks leading up to Tesa's decision to break her silence is connected to something that has been quietly unfolding in legal and financial circles around Vaughn's estate. Conversations that most fans never hear about because they happen in rooms that are deliberately kept away from social media and public attention. According to insiders with knowledge of ongoing discussions surrounding Vaughn's legacy and the assets attached to his name, there have been disputes about how certain decisions are being made, who has authority over what, and crucially, who is and is not being acknowledged as part of Vaughn's family structure in those conversations. Sources claim that Tesa, who has been one of the most vocal and visible members of Vaughn's family since his death, allegedly became aware of the existence of this child through channels that were separate from the child's mother. According to these sources, the information reached her in a way that made it impossible to dismiss or ignore, and her alleged reaction was not anger directed at the child or the mother, but something closer to grief. Grief that her son had a piece of himself walking around in the world that had been kept from her, and grief that the people who claimed to love and protect Vaughn's legacy had allegedly known and said nothing. And this is the part that nobody is talking about. According to sources close to Tesa, she allegedly began making quiet inquiries of her own after receiving this information. She reportedly reached out to people in Vaughn's circle, people who had been present during the relevant period of Vaughn's life, asking direct questions and receiving what sources describe as evasive, inconsistent answers. Each inconsistency allegedly deepened her conviction that the silence around this child was not organic but constructed, and that the construction had been deliberate enough to require multiple people to maintain it over a period of years. Sources claim she allegedly told someone close to her, and again these are words reported through sources and not confirmed statements, that she had spent 5 years watching people use her son's name to build themselves up, and she was not going to let them use that same silence to erase a part of him. Because here is what sources are now alleging, and this is the detail that reportedly sent shockwaves through the small circle of people who were already aware of the situation. According to insiders, the mother of this child and Vaughn's mother Tesa have allegedly been in contact. Not adversarial contact. Not legal contact. Allegedly personal contact, initiated with care and conducted with a level of privacy that sources say both women insisted upon. And what reportedly came out of those conversations, according to sources familiar with what was discussed, is a shared understanding between these two women that the people who had the most to gain from keeping this child invisible were not acting in anyone's interest except their own. Stay right here because it gets worse. Sources allege that during these conversations, the child's mother reportedly shared details about Vaughn that Tesa allegedly confirmed were consistent with things only someone genuinely close to her son would know. Specific details. Not the kind of things you read in interviews or hear in songs. The kind of details that sources describe as proof of a real connection that Vaughn had worked hard to keep private, not out of shame but out of protection. According to insiders, Tesa allegedly said after hearing these details that she had no doubt this child was her grandson, and that her doubt was not about the child but about the adults who had allegedly worked to keep him hidden. The financial dimensions of this situation are something that sources describe as significant, and it is allegedly those dimensions that explain why the pressure on the child's mother to stay silent was so consistent and so organized over such a long period of time. Vaughn's streaming numbers in 2024 alone reportedly generated millions of dollars in royalty income. His catalog continues to be licensed, sampled, and referenced in ways that keep his financial legacy active and growing years after his death. According to sources with knowledge of estate-related discussions, the acknowledgement of an additional heir would have implications that certain parties allegedly found inconvenient, which sources claim explains why the silence was maintained not just by one person or two people, but by what insiders describe as a loose network of individuals with aligned financial interests. Here is what they allegedly did not want you to find out. According to sources, there are allegedly documents, not court filings, not public records, but private documents, that were reportedly prepared during Vaughn's lifetime that reference this child in ways that would be difficult to explain if the official position is that this child does not exist or was not acknowledged. Sources familiar with these documents describe them in general terms, claiming they exist in a form that is accessible to the right people and that their existence is known to at least some of the individuals who have allegedly been maintaining the silence around this situation. Whether those documents will ever become part of a public conversation is something that sources say depends entirely on what Tesa decides to do next, and according to insiders, she has already decided. She is allegedly done being quiet, and the people who built their position around her silence are reportedly not ready for what comes next. What sources describe as Tesa's breaking of silence is not, according to insiders, going to look like a social media post or a viral moment engineered for maximum attention. The women who have been allegedly involved in this situation have reportedly decided to handle it in a way that is deliberate, documented, and designed to be difficult to dismiss or discredit. According to sources close to the situation, the approach being taken is one that prioritizes the child above everything else. Not the narrative, not the clout, not the reaction of people who built careers on Vaughn's memory, but the actual living child who allegedly has a right to his identity and his inheritance. Sources claim that legal conversations have allegedly begun. Not full proceedings, not public filings yet, but the kind of preliminary legal activity that sources describe as the groundwork being laid for something more formal. According to insiders familiar with these early stages, the legal framing being considered is not primarily about money, though sources acknowledge that the financial dimensions cannot be separated from any conversation about a deceased artist's estate and a child who may have a claim within it. The framing, according to these sources, is allegedly about recognition. About a child having his father's name attached to him in the way that Vaughn's other children have their father's name attached to them. But here is where it gets interesting in a way that goes beyond the personal. Because sources allege that the reaction within certain parts of Vaughn's circle to the news that Tesa was allegedly moving in this direction has been, according to insiders, significant. People who have been quiet about this situation for years are reportedly beginning to have conversations that they were not having before. Sources describe a kind of scrambling, an alleged repositioning by individuals who understood that if Tesa is genuinely prepared to be public about this, the carefully maintained version of Vaughn's story that has served certain interests is about to become much more complicated to sustain. And this is the part that nobody is talking about. According to sources, there is allegedly at least one person in Vaughn's immediate circle who has known about this child since before Vaughn died, and who has been actively involved in the management of information around the situation since November 2020. Sources describe this person as someone with enough proximity to Vaughn's legacy to have influence over how his story is told publicly and enough awareness of the financial implications to understand exactly what acknowledgement of this child would mean. Whether that person is prepared to cooperate with what Tesa is allegedly moving toward or whether they intend to resist it is something that sources say is currently unresolved. And that unresolved question is allegedly one of the reasons the situation has not yet broken into full public view. Now here is the twist that sources say changes the entire emotional weight of this story. According to insiders who claim to have seen photographs, this child reportedly looks like Vaughn in a way that is, according to their description, unmistakable. Sources who have allegedly seen the boy describe specific features: the eyes, the jawline, the way he carries himself even at his young age, that they claim are so consistent with Vaughn's appearance that the physical resemblance alone is allegedly enough to make anyone who loved Vaughn stop and feel the weight of what has been allegedly kept hidden. One source, speaking with evident emotion according to the person who relayed this account, reportedly said that looking at this child is like seeing Vaughn at that age, and that the idea of this boy growing up without his father's name, without acknowledgement from a family and community that celebrates his father daily, is something that this source described as injustice that has been sitting quietly in plain sight. Stay right here because this next part is what allegedly set everything in motion in the final weeks. Sources claim that the child, now old enough to use a tablet and navigate the internet with the casual fluency of children his age, allegedly encountered King Von's music and image online in the way that millions of young people encounter it every day, through YouTube, through TikTok, through the endless circulation of Von's face and voice that his fanbase keeps alive. And according to sources close to his mother, the child allegedly asked her a question that she had been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. He allegedly asked her why the man in the videos looked like him. According to insiders who were told about this moment by someone present for it, his mother's response to that question is what allegedly led directly to her first real conversation with Tesa, and it is what sources describe as the emotional catalyst that moved everything from a private situation to one that is now allegedly on the edge of becoming very public. Here is what they allegedly did not want you to find out. Because sources claim that when Tesa heard about that moment, a small child asking his mother why a famous dead rapper looked like him, she allegedly made a decision that sources describe as final and irreversible. According to insiders, she reportedly said that she had watched people put Vaughn's face on murals, on merchandise, on album covers, on tribute posts every November 6th, and she was not going to allow a child who carries his actual blood to keep living in the shadow of all of that visibility as though he does not exist. Sources say she allegedly told someone close to her that Vaughn would not have wanted this. That whatever else was complicated about the situation, whatever the circumstances of how this child came into the world, Vaughn's nature as a father, which people who knew him personally describe consistently as something he took seriously, would not have allowed him to leave his own son invisible. And that, according to sources, is where things stand right now. On the edge of something that cannot be undone once it begins. With a grandmother allegedly ready to speak, a mother allegedly ready to stand beside her, and a child who has done nothing except exist, and whose existence is allegedly about to force a conversation that certain people have spent 5 years making sure would never happen. This story is not over. If anything, according to sources close to the situation, it is only now reaching the point where the people who have been holding it back can no longer hold it. There are questions sitting in the middle of everything you just heard that have no clean answers yet, and those questions are the ones that matter most going forward. If legal proceedings do begin, and sources suggest they may be closer than most people realize, what happens to the carefully constructed public narrative around Vaughn's legacy when a court starts asking the same questions that Tesa is allegedly already asking privately? And if the person within Vaughn's circle who allegedly knew about this child since before Vaughn died is eventually identified publicly, what does that do to the relationships and loyalties that have defined OTF's public image since November 2020? These are not questions with easy answers. These are questions that sources say are being asked in rooms right now by people who are very aware that the ground beneath them is shifting. You need to hit that like button on this video specifically because this story involves a child who has no platform, no publicist, and no one in a position of power speaking for him yet. Every like this video gets is a signal that people care about what happens to him, and that signal matters in ways that go beyond algorithm and engagement. If you are subscribed, stay subscribed, because sources indicate that developments in this situation could surface at any point, and when they do, this channel will have the full breakdown before anyone else. Now here is the question for the comments, and think carefully before you answer because there is no obvious right answer here. If you were in Tesa's position, if you were a mother who had lost her son and then discovered that a piece of him existed in the world that people had allegedly hidden from you, would you go public immediately, or would you handle it privately to protect the child first? Let the comments answer that. Because people are going to disagree, and that disagreement is going to say something true about how we think about loyalty, legacy, and what we owe to children who never asked to be born into complicated situations. There is one more thing that sources have hinted at but have not yet been willing to say directly. Something about the night Vaughn died and who allegedly knew what before the rest of the world found out. And when that piece is ready to be told, you will hear it here first. Some silences, when they finally break everything.